Okay, we've seen the DOM, we've seen how the tree represented as HTML turns into a tree in memory with nodes using JavaScript and get element by ID on the global variable document to grab a node of the tree, and then we can go and even assign to the attributes of that node. Okay, so now I want to look at a particular JavaScript program. Well, first we'll talk about how it works, and then we'll talk about how lousy it is, and we'll refactor it and go through some changes. So looking down here, I have a little, it's called hiding parts code, and you've seen things like this. We have a little description of aardvarks here. And there's a little menu bar on the side, and I can go ahead and look at bees or donkeys. Go back to aardvarks. Interesting, that text is still selected. Yeah, so I can go ahead and switch between these different things here. Let's go look at the source code for that and see how that's actually being affected. So I'm going to scroll down a little bit. So if you look at this text here, I have a paragraph called Animal Details, and then I have a paragraph, ID aardvarks, with earth pigs have long snouts, and then another paragraph about bees, and another paragraph about Cheshires, and so on. All 5 paragraphs are sitting here right in the middle of the page, and yet we only saw one at any given moment. Okay, so, and these things as well are inside some tables, so there's a table with 1 row and 2 columns. But okay, so that second cell had 5 different paragraphs in it. However you look at this, ID equals aardvarks, ID equal bees, style, and within the style we have we set the display to be none. Okay, so usually the display style setting isn't there at all. Okay, if it's set to NONE, then it doesn't display at all. Okay, so if that thing is unset, things display normally, and if it's set to NONE, then it doesn't display. Okay, so this is a little bit weird, and we're not going to do everything like this, but in the example we just saw, all 5 paragraphs were sitting right there in the HTML, and just the CSS styling was saying, hey, 4 of them at any given moment have their display set to none. And you might wonder about how it looks like all 5 are set to none, and yet we saw one of them when we first loaded the page, the aardvarks was showing. And that's because after putting these 5 paragraphs, there was a little script tag. And what did the script tag do? We ran JavaScript that called show of aardvarks. Now, show is a function we wrote ourselves. We'll look at the definition of it in a moment. Okay? So we called the JavaScript function show, and we passed it the string aardvarks. What did that function do? It turned on the display. It made it so that that paragraph with the given ID, aardvarks, really does display. Before we even get to that code, how do we get it so when somebody clicks on a web form, JavaScript runs? Okay. Up in the first cell of the table, there's that menu bar, and here's a typical row of the menu bar. I have an anchor tag just so it styles as a link. It doesn't actually link anywhere particularly, but I want it styled as a link to cue users in so they know to click on it. Okay. Well, I did have an href. Where does it go to? It goes to the aardvarks ID within the same page. So the hash means look for the ID. Look for the aardvarks ID. So it's going to go and it's going to zoom me to this paragraph here. Okay, fair enough. By the way, before that hash mark, you can go ahead and put any URL you like. If we omit it, it's relative to our current page, so it's just where we are, the current page, hash aardvarks. But be aware that if you do want to link to the middle of a Wikipedia article, Wikipedia, every subsection has its own ID attribute, and so you can have some Wikipedia URL followed by a hash sign and then an ID that occurs inside that Wikipedia page and get a link to go right to that part of the page. Anyway, here's what's the interesting part, onclick. Okay, when somebody clicks, so onclick is actually an attribute that you can attach to pretty much any HTML node. Technically not quite every node, but or any node, but almost every node. A tags, P tags, li tags, whatever you want. And that means when the corresponding section gets clicked on, then what happens? The browser says, hey, if somebody clicks on the stuff that is being created by this A tag, in this case, run this JavaScript code. So that's why when we went and clicked on B's, that's why our code, the browser looked at the reference here and said, hey, I'm going to call show of B's. And similar, so clicking on Cheshire invokes the onclick attribute of the thing that I clicked on. So, okay. Okay, so now let's go and look at the JavaScript function show. Okay, and we're going to go up here. A good place to put JavaScript needs to be inside a script tag. If you're going to put it inside this file, let's go ahead and put it inside the head. That's a common place to do it. So we have an HTML tag, and then a head tag with a little meta thing, a title tag, and then script for the scripts are just defining a function. So this script tag here, all it contains is a single function definition. It doesn't actually call anything or do anything, it just defines the function to be called later, and it gets called later by those onScript attributes. Or sorry, onclick. By the way, I should mention that onclick, every attribute is a key value pair. The value has to be some text. The way I view it is for onclick, the browser says, hey, I'm going to look at that attribute value. It's a string. I'm going to run that string as a JavaScript program, a JavaScript function call. Okay, so here's the function show. And right away, look at how long this is. I feel nauseated here. Actually, I took this from, this is something I saw on somebody's webpage, and I'd never seen somebody turn things off and on like that. I'm like, well, I wonder how they do that. And I looked at it, I'm like, oh, okay, that's how. And I also said, okay, show of ID. So I pass in a string, and I even sort of have a little comment here. It takes in, not a very good comment, is it? It doesn't quite. There's only one parameter called ID, and it's the ID of the element of the item to display. Okay, so it's an ID attribute. And what do? We're going to go to Document, Get Element by ID. So first of all, if they pass in show of aardvarks, we're going to hit this block here. Document, Get Element by ID of aardvarks. Grab that node of the tree, that paragraph. This part here is a paragraph node. Within that paragraph node, go look up its style attribute. Within that style object, which has a whole bunch of things, set the display attribute to be the empty string. Okay, and that causes the display to be normal, so it actually shows. And then for all the other four others, bees, cheshires, donkeys, and giraffes, go ahead and set that display attribute to be none, makes them invisible. Okay. So that's why when somebody clicks on the cat's link, or the Cheshire's link, okay, the onclick attribute is show of Cheshires. We come up to this function here, show, and we pass in Cheshires. Our if-else-if drops down to this branch, and we hit these 5 lines of code, which turns 4 paragraphs off and 1 paragraph on, so to speak. Okay, so does that make sense? Though the interplay, how we get the JavaScript invoked. And I guess there are several things there. We first define the JavaScript function, okay? Then later on we can have an onclick attribute, and we'll talk about some of the other attributes you can have. But any HTML tag, you can add an onclick attribute, and that string there will get interpreted as JavaScript code by the JavaScript interpreter. Okay, and you can also, you don't need, onclick is not the only way to invoke code from the middle of a HTML page. You can just do it by a straight up script tag as my browser is loading this HTML page. It says, oh yeah, I got a p tag, I got a p tag, another p tag, another p tag. Oh my goodness, look at all these p tags. Hey, I have a script tag. I'm going to run the stuff inside that script tag right now. And that's why down here it actually did a show of aardvarks initially. So that's also why this function got defined. It came along, my browser came along, saw the script tag and said, okay, I'm going to go ahead and execute this as JavaScript, and it's just a function definition. So it didn't execute anything, it just defined the function. Okay, so define your code in a script tag, call it through onclick attributes or a straight up script tag later on. So I'll close with one little gotcha about script tags. Not that I'll quiz you on this, but it might come up and stop you. With a script tag, right now I'm showing everything, well, never mind, I'm going to talk about this later when we get to a little bit later about external files. But the point that I'm going to make is never use the shorthand notation for script tags. That open angle bracket script, a bunch of stuff, including an external file, and then slash angle bracket. That self-closing notation does not work with a script tag and a few others. Okay, so instead say, even if you don't have a body inside your script tag because you're referring to an external file, open bracket script, blah, 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 close angle bracket, open bracket slash script. Sorry, I'm going backwards, I realize. But you don't need to worry about that since I will talk about it later. Gosh, this awful, awful, awful code. It might work. I'm going to grade you down really poorly on it. So we have these 5 animals here. I want to go and add something for H. I'm going to go add hedgehogs. How many times am I going to have to type or copy paste the word hedgehogs to add that? Well, clearly I'm going to need to have a paragraph about this new cute little critter, and I'll have to give it an ID. ID equals hedgehogs. I think I can't get around that. I'll have to make a paragraph, and I'm going to have to give it the ID hedgehogs if I want to add another animal. Okay? So yeah, I'll add hedgehogs there. Up in here, I'm going to have to go and add another another link that has hedgehogs mentioned here, and hedgehogs mentioned here, and hedgehogs mentioned here. So we're up to 2, 3, 4 instances of saying hedgehog. And then, oh my goodness, how many times am I going to mention hedgehogs here? Well, I'm going to have to turn it to none in aardvarks and bees. So all the 5 existing ones, all the 5 existing animals, are going to have to add a line about hedgehogs, and then I'll have to add a new case about hedgehogs that will mention hedgehogs in the if statement, and it will mention it once more. I need to use my nose. I'll need to mention hedgehogs 11 times to add hedgehogs. Oh! And the next time I add something, I think it will take 12 mentions to add something for something that starts with J, giraffes. Yeah, and the next animal I add will take 13 mentions. The next animal I add will take 14 mentions. And this is not sustainable. Your boss comes along and says, hey, I like this little on-off thing. Go ahead and do something for all 50 states. You're not going to be happy copying and pasting here. Don't do it. You know it's wrong. Don't just do it and say, yeah, I'll get it working. So how can we do better? And I'll leave you to think about that before we start the next video. Do think about it. There's one pretty easy way, if you think about it, one pretty easy way that can really collapse this code and save about 80% of the number of characters devoted to this feature. But we'll reveal that in the next video.